Hi students. So now we're going to go through chapter 10 of The Giver. So Jonas has received his little folder, a brief description of his job, which hasn't really helped him understand anything very much about what the job is, except there are interesting rules which make him different from the rest of the community, like him now not taking medication and him being allowed to lie. So he accompanies Fiona. She's got her first day at the House of the Old, and he's sent somewhere that he's never been before. They're both very nervous. The nameplates of their bikes have changed. Everything's different now. They're 12. Their lives are becoming serious and real. And so he waves goodbye to her, and he goes to this. He goes to the building, which is near the annex, doesn't look anything very special. He buzzes on the buzzer, there's a voice, and he's immediately summoned in. The interesting thing is that the female attendant who greets him there, she stands for him, which is a sign of respect, and she says, "Welcome, receiver of memory." Then she says, "Go in." There's a click on the door, and something's interesting here. The door to the next room is locked. In this community, no doors are ever locked. So this is something very weird. When you think about locking, you think about privacy. And it might remind you of when Jonas comes down every day and he has to tell his parents what he dreamt about, and the fact that he has to be honest about everything, except now that he is a receiver, he doesn't have to. But this idea that this is a community without privacy, but here in this special place there is a lock. So this is somewhere that is hidden away. Okay, so she tells him to hurry in. The receiver doesn't like to be kept waiting. And he goes inside. He finds himself in a very nice room, which is with very different furniture. Usually the furniture in the community is functional. It's practical. A bed for sleeping, a table for eating. But here we see things which are more decorative. There's fabric on the chairs, fabric on the upholstered chairs. Let's see if I can mark it. Okay. And the sofa is slightly thicker and more luxurious. Everything's carved and different. And there's a beautiful cloth over at the far end of the room, which is embroidered. Embroidered is rikma. Okay. And the other big difference here is the books. Okay, we now discover that in Jonas's community, people don't really read anything other than books which are practical guides about how to live in the community. There's a description of offices, factories, and buildings, and there's a book of rules. Of course, the rules are very important, but other than that, stories, history books, any kind of other books, then they don't. He's never seen them before. They don't exist. So this place is absolutely covered with books, covered with bookcases filled which reach the ceiling, hundreds, maybe thousands of books, and he doesn't understand what the books have. He couldn't imagine what the thousands of books contained, because he doesn't understand the power of a book. He thinks that a book is just something that has rules. He thinks, well, could there be so many rules that I don't know about in the community? And then he sees a man sitting there who's watching him, and he introduces himself, and he's told, "Welcome, receiver of memory." Okay, and he recognizes the man. This is the man from the ceremony who was dressed in special clothing. And he has pale eyes, and he starts immediately for apologizing for his lack of understanding, And but the man doesn't give him the standard "I accept your apology" thing, because remember, he's not supposed to apologize. He says he's very careful about what he says. He says, I think that you are the receiver of memory, because he is welcomed as a receiver of memory. Up here, welcome receiver of memory. That's what the man says to Jonas. Jonas is very confused because he thinks that the man is a receiver of memory. And the man looks at him and he doesn't speak quickly. He thinks, he's thoughtful, he's silent. And then he says, beginning today, this moment, at least to me, you are the receiver. He says, I've been receiver for a very long time. You can see that, can't you? Jonas nods because he sees that the man is wrinkled and he's old and he looks tired. The man looks very tired. The flesh around his eyes is darkened into shadowed circles. He says, and he says to the man, I see you're very old. And he responds with respect, because the old are given respect. And the man says, actually, I'm not as old as I look. The thing is, this job that he's got, it's made him older. You know, when you do certain things, they age you, things that are hard. So then he talks about how happy he was when Jonas was selected, because the failure, he says, the failure of the previous selection was 10 years ago, and my energy is starting to diminish. Diminish means my energy is starting to get less and less. I need what strength I have remaining for your training. We have hard and painful work to do, you and I. So it seems that this receiver is running out of energy. Jonas has to take over this job from him. So he sits him down and he tells him about, that when he was a 12, he was selected the same way as Jonas is. And he was frightened just like Jonas. And that he came to the same room, and it seemed like a long time ago. And that the previous receiver was old just like he is today. And he says, you may ask questions. And it's forbidden to talk of it. And Jonas says, I know, I read the regulations. He says his job is important, has enormous honor. It doesn't mean he's perfect. And he admits, he says, when I tried before to train your successor, I failed. Okay, so he's admitted that something went wrong. Something's gone wrong. There's trouble in paradise. Okay, so he's got to make it right with Jonas. Jonas has a lot of questions. None of this is really helping him understand what's going on. So he says to him, the receiver says to him, simply stated, although it's not really simple at all, my job is to transmit to you all the memories I have within me. Transmit means to give over in a non-physical way. It can also be leshader. Memories of the past. So Jonas says, oh, this is nice. I'd like to hear the story of your life and listen to your memories. And it quickly apologizes for interrupting. And the man says, no apologies in this room. We haven't got time, which is interesting. What does it mean we haven't time? Why are they in a rush? What's going on? Okay. So Jonas is completely confused. Why has he been selected in this really honored job to listen to a bunch of stories? In fact, he feels he could do something more important. And he says, in any case, I've spoken to old people. I've listened to their stories. I know what it's like. He says, no. The man says to him, it's not my past, not my childhood that I must transmit to you. It's the memories of the whole world. Okay, memories of the whole world. What does that mean? So he says, the memories of before you, before me, before the previous receiver, and the generations before him. Jonas is completely confused. The whole world? I don't understand. Don't you mean just us? Do you mean elsewhere too? He can't grasp it, but he doesn't know anything about the whole world. And then he thinks, maybe I'm not smart enough to understand what you mean by the whole world. And the receiver answers him, there's much more. There's all that goes beyond and that is elsewhere, and all that goes back and back and back. I've received all of those when I was selected, and here in this room all alone I re-experience them again and again. It is how wisdom comes and how we shape our future. And he says, I'm so weighted with them. Shoklimalai, that it's something's very heavy about all these experiences. And Jonas feels really bad for him. And then he tries to describe it. He says it's like going downhill through a steep snow on a sled. And it's like, everything's like, it's exhilarating. Exhilarating means it's very, very exciting. And the excitement builds up and the speed, and you keep going. And then he really looks at Jonas, he realises that means nothing to you. And Jonas totally doesn't understand. And he says, Jonas, you don't know what snow is, do you? And Jonas shakes his head. And you don't know what a sled is, and you don't know what being a runner is. And Jonas says, no. And he doesn't even know what downhill is, because everything's flat in the community. So here we understand that there's something going on, that there's no snow in the community, and there's no excitement. There's no sled on runners where you can get like excited about doing something, action, adrenaline. There's nothing like that. And even there's no such thing as downhill, right? There's no such thing as running down a hill. Okay, so that gives you more of an idea about this community. Each time we read another chapter, we get a deeper description of the community Jonas lives in. Okay, so he says, okay, so this is where we're going to start. He puts Jonas on the bed, and he has to lie face down. He has to remove his tunic. Jonas is a bit nervous. And then the man does something absolutely shocking. Okay, there's a speaker in the room, like in every single room in the community. This speaker is for making announcements, and it's also for listening in. Okay, that's why everybody knows what's going on in everyone else's lives. That's why Jonas got into trouble for bringing the apple into his dwelling, because there's somebody listening into what's going on, and he switches the speaker off. Okay, and Jonas can't believe it. How can you switch the speaker off? What power is that you can actually switch this speaker off? So now they have complete privacy. The door's locked, the speaker's off. He tells Jonas to close his eyes, and he tells him to relax. And he says, I am going to transmit the memory of snow. Okay, and he puts his hand on his chest.